My family spent $300,000 funding my sister's LLC while refusing to pay a single dollar toward my college tuition. My mom looked me in the eye and said I had no real future. Now my software business is crushing theirs. They sent me a formal partnership contract. I pressed delete. That delete button is the end of this story. But the story does not start with the delete button. The story starts in a suburb outside Atlanta, Georgia, in a house where money was real and decisions about who deserved it were made based on a set of beliefs about potential that I was consistently on the wrong side of. I need to tell you what $300,000 looked like in my family before I tell you what delete looked like. Because the amount matters, and the context of the amount matters more than the amount itself. $300,000 was not an inheritance windfall or a sudden liquidity event for my parents. My father ran a regional logistics business in Atlanta that had been profitable for 12 years and had produced the kind of sustained income that allowed my parents to make significant financial decisions deliberately rather than impulsively. The money existed in the way that money exists for people who have built something real over a long period. Not dramatically, just available, waiting to be deployed toward things the family believed in. The thing my family believed in was my sister's business. My sister Ashley had an idea for a boutique event planning and luxury gifting company that she had been describing at family dinners since she was 19 years old. The idea was real. The market was real. Ashley was warm and social and had the kind of taste that made people trust her aesthetic judgment and the kind of personality that made clients feel like they were the most important thing happening in her day. She had gone to a marketing program at Georgia State and had graduated with the energy and the connections and the genuine enthusiasm of someone who was ready to start. My parents wrote checks. Not one check. Multiple checks across the first 3 years of Ashley's company, branded the Callaway Collection, which handled corporate gifting, private events, and luxury experiential packages for clients in the Atlanta market. The checks covered the initial branding, the website, the office space, the staff salaries when the revenue was not yet sufficient to cover them, the equipment, the inventory of gift products that made up the gifting side of the business, and the marketing campaigns that Sandra, their family friend and part-time marketing consultant, had designed and executed. The total across 3 years was $300,000. I was not asking for $300,000. I was asking for $48,000 across 4 years of computer science tuition at Georgia Tech, which was the school I had been accepted to, and which had been, for the 3 years of high school that preceded the acceptance, the thing I talked about at the same family dinners where Ashley talked about the Callaway Collection. My mother said the software field was too competitive and too unpredictable, and that the companies I admired were built by people with connections and resources that we did not have, and that a degree from Georgia Tech would produce debt rather than opportunity, and that she was not confident I had what the field required. She said, "You have no real future in that direction, Maya. You need to think practically." She said this in October of my senior year of high school. I was 17 years old. I did not argue. I did not cry. I sat at the kitchen table and I finished my dinner and I thought about what practically meant and whether practically and forward were the same direction. They were not the same direction. Subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, share this with someone who has been told they have no real future by someone who should have known better, and ring the notification bell. This story goes exactly where it needs to go. My name is Maya Callaway, and I am 28 years old. I grew up in Alpharetta, Georgia, which sat about 30 miles north of Atlanta in the specific category of suburb, where the neighborhoods were planned, and the school districts were strong, and the houses communicated that the families inside them had arrived at a certain level and intended to maintain it. The Callaway house was a 4-bedroom colonial on a cul-de-sac that my parents had bought in 2003, and that my mother had furnished with the careful intentionality of someone for whom the physical environment was a statement about who you were and where you were headed. My father, Gerald Callaway, had spent 15 years building a regional logistics and freight coordination business called Callaway Transport Partners, that by the time I was in middle school had grown into a genuine regional operation with 140 employees, 6 distribution points across Georgia and South Carolina, and the specific stable profitability of a business that had found its market and learned to serve it consistently. He was not a dramatic businessman. He was a steady one. He made decisions carefully and kept the business focused on what it was good at rather than expanding into territories that would have required capabilities he had not yet developed. My mother, Patricia, had stopped working when Ashley was born and had managed the household and the family's social life with the specific energy of someone who found that work genuinely engaging rather than limiting. She was organized and aesthetically minded and deeply invested in how the family appeared to the extended network of other Alpharetta families with whom she maintained the ongoing social relationships that defined the texture of her daily life. She genuinely loved her daughters. Her love was not in question. Her calibration of what her daughters were capable of and what her daughters deserved was the thing that required examination. Ashley was 3 years older than me and had been the daughter my mother understood immediately and completely. Not in a calculated way, Ashley genuinely was the kind of person my mother was naturally equipped to understand. She was social, visually oriented, confident in rooms, and interested in the specific things that my mother was interested in, which were aesthetic and experiential and connected to the relationship between how things looked and how they made people feel. When Ashley talked about starting a luxury event and gifting business, my mother heard a language she spoke fluently. The support came naturally from understanding. I was a different kind of person from a relatively early age. I had been interested in how things worked at the computational level from the time I was 11 years old, and my father had bought a laptop that had a development environment he had installed for work purposes, and that I had started exploring while he was at the office. The specific logic of programming, the way that a problem could be decomposed into components, and each component could be addressed systematically, and the components could be assembled back into something that solved the original problem, was the most satisfying thing I had encountered up to that point, and I pursued it with the focused intensity that I brought to everything I found satisfying, which was complete. By the time I was 13, I had built 3 functional programs. They were not sophisticated, they were functional. A scheduling tool, a budget tracker, and a small game that I had built by following an online tutorial and then modifying extensively until it was substantially different from the original. My father had looked at the programs with genuine interest and had said, "You built these yourself?" I had said yes. He had said, "How?" I had walked him through the logic. He had listened with the attentive expression of a man who respected the logic of systems because his own business was built on the logic of systems. He had said, "That's impressive, Maya." My mother had looked at the programs and said they were clever and had asked if I wanted to come with her to pick up Ashley from her dance class. The pattern established itself in the way these patterns did, not through any single dramatic moment, but through the accumulation of many small moments that each seemed ordinary and whose significance was only visible in the aggregate over years. My father's interest in my technical work was genuine but secondary to his primary attention, which was the business. My mother's interest was supportive but distant, the interest of someone who found the thing her daughter was doing impressive in the abstract without understanding it in the particular. Ashley's interests were the ones that occupied the family's conversational energy because they were the interests everyone could engage with. I received strong academic support throughout high school. My parents paid for tutoring when I needed it and took my grades seriously and attended the events that school produced. What they did not do was engage with the specific direction my interests were moving in with any depth. The programming, the software development, the specific focus on computational systems that was shaping how I understood my future. These existed in the household, the way things existed when they were acknowledged without being understood. When I was accepted to Georgia Tech's College of Computing in March of my senior year, I came home and told my parents at dinner. My father said congratulations and asked if I had called my grandmother. My mother said that was very nice and asked what the tuition situation looked like. I had researched the tuition situation thoroughly. I said $48,000 across 4 years for in-state tuition, and that Georgia Tech had a strong reputation for industry placement, and that the starting salaries for Georgia Tech computer science graduates were among the highest in the state. My mother said she was not sure the software field was the right direction. She said the field was competitive and that the companies I was interested in required resources and connections that the family did not have. She said she wanted me to think practically and consider programs that had clearer and more predictable outcomes. I said, "Mom, Georgia Tech CS is one of the strongest programs in the country. The placement outcomes are documented." She said she understood that, and that she was not trying to discourage me, but that she had concerns, and that the concerns were real, and that the family had other financial commitments. The other financial commitments were Ashley's business. I understood this in real time. Ashley's company had been funded for 2 years at that point, and the checks had not stopped. My mother had never described Ashley's business as a financial commitment when she talked about it. She described it as a family investment. The asymmetry between investment and financial commitment was the asymmetry between which daughter's future the family believed in. My father did not contradict my mother at dinner. Later that evening, he came to my room. He sat on the edge of my desk chair. He said, "I want to talk to you about the tuition." I said, "Okay." He said, "Your mother has concerns." I said, "I know." He said, "I want you to know that I see what you're building. I've seen it since the scheduling tool when you were 13. I said, "Dad." He said, "The business is in a stretch right now. The expansion into South Carolina has required more capital than projected. I'm not in a position to commit to 4 years of tuition without impacting the business's ability to manage the expansion. I want to be honest about that." I said, "You funded Ashley's business." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "We did, and that was a family decision." I said, "So is this." He said, "Maya." I said, "It's okay, Dad, I'll figure it out." He said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I know." He left. I opened my laptop, and I applied for every scholarship I could find with application windows still open. I applied for student loans. I researched work-study programs. I built a financial model across 4 years that showed how Georgia Tech was affordable if I maximized scholarship income, carried the maximum loan amount, worked 15 to 20 hours per week, and maintained the academic performance required to keep the merit awards I had already been offered. The model worked. I enrolled at Georgia Tech in August. Georgia Tech's College of Computing in the fall of my freshman year had the specific quality of an environment that was serious about the thing it was serious about. This was different from the supportive but ambient interest in technology that had characterized my household growing up. This was an environment where the people around me had the same focus I had, and where that focus was treated as the normal condition rather than the unusual one. I worked 20 hours per week from the first semester. A campus bookstore for the first year, then a part-time IT support role for the university's administrative systems in the second year, which paid better and which gave me the practical experience of working inside real institutional technology infrastructure while I was learning systems design in the classroom. The IT role led to a relationship with the assistant director of the university's technology services department, a man named Daniel Ose, who had been at Georgia Tech for 11 years, and who recognized what I was doing beyond the help desk tasks I was assigned, and who started giving me projects with more complexity as he confirmed I could handle them. Daniel Osei was the first person who understood specifically what I was building toward. Not in a mentorship context that required formalization. In the ordinary context of someone working beside a person who was clearly thinking about things that were more interesting than the work they were currently doing, and who had started giving them more interesting work to find out what they would do with it. I did more with it each time. He noticed. He said, in the spring of my sophomore year, "What are you going to do after you finish here?" I said, "Build something." He said, "What specifically?" I told him what I had been thinking about for the previous 14 months. The idea was in the space of operational efficiency software for small to mid-size logistics and distribution businesses, the specific category of business I had watched my father run for 12 years, and that I understood from the inside in ways that a pure technologist without that background would not have understood. The category had a specific set of operational problems that the available software solutions addressed imperfectly and expensively. The imperfection and the expense created an opportunity that I had been mapping with increasing specificity since my first systems design course made the technical dimensions of the opportunity clear to me. Daniel said, "Your father is in logistics." I said, "Yes." He said, "Have you used his company as a case study?" I said, "I've been studying his operations since I was 14. Daniel looked at me for a moment. He said, "The idea has a market and a creator who understands the market from the inside. That's a different starting position than most student founders have." I said, "I know." He said, "Do you know about the Createx program?" I did not know about Createx. It was Georgia Tech's startup accelerator for student founders, which provided resources, mentorship, customer discovery support, and a small amount of seed funding to students who were accepted into the program. Daniel connected me to the program's intake coordinator that week. I applied to Createx in the spring of my sophomore year with a project proposal for what I was calling at that stage FlowOps, a logistics operations management platform designed specifically for regional distribution businesses with between 50 and 500 employees. The proposal included a market analysis, a preliminary technical architecture, and a customer discovery summary based on 12 conversations I had conducted with logistics operations managers in the Atlanta area over the previous 4 months, several of whom I had reached through my father's industry network without telling my father what I was using the access for. The proposal was accepted. The Createx program gave me the specific things I needed at the specific moment I needed them. A faculty advisor who had founded and sold a B2B software company and who understood the category from operational experience. Customer discovery guidance that pushed me to talk to more potential users than I would have talked to on my own and to be more systematic about what I learned from them. A $2,000 seed grant that covered the development infrastructure costs for the first working prototype. And most importantly, a cohort of other student founders who were working on real things and who treated the work as the thing rather than as a resume item. I built the first working prototype of FlowOps in the summer between sophomore and junior year. I was living in the same student apartment I had been in since freshman year, working on the platform in the evenings and weekends around the IT job that had expanded to 30 hours per week over the summer when full-time staff went on vacation. The prototype was not sophisticated. It was functional. It addressed 3 specific pain points that my customer discovery conversations had identified as the highest priority operational problems for the target business: size, route optimization for distribution scheduling, real-time inventory visibility across multiple locations, and automated exception handling for delivery exceptions that required manual intervention under the existing solutions. I showed the prototype to Daniel in August. He used it for 30 minutes on a test dataset. He said, "This is cleaner than 2 of the enterprise solutions we evaluated last year at 5 times your eventual price point." I said, "The enterprise solutions are designed for enterprise scale. The UX complexity comes from the feature set that enterprise buyers require. My target doesn't need most of those features." He said, "Right-sized functionality at right-sized price." I said, "Yes." He said, "Who have you shown this to?" I said, "You're the first." He said, "Show it to the advisor this week. Then show it to every logistics operations manager you can get in front of." I showed it to the advisor that week. The advisor said the prototype demonstrated the core value proposition clearly and that the next step was getting it in front of 5 paying customers before the end of junior year. I got it in front of 12. 3 became paying customers. The first check came in October of my junior year. It was small, The pricing I had established for the early adopter tier was below what I expected to charge at scale, deliberately, to lower the barrier to the initial commitment and to validate willingness to pay before I had a mature product. But the check was real, and it was mine, and it was the specific payment of a customer who had chosen my product over alternatives that existed in the market. I did not tell my family about FlowOps for the first 3 years of its development. This was not a strategic decision in the sense of planning for a reveal. It was a practical decision based on what I needed the development years to be, which was focused and quiet and not subject to the opinions of people who had demonstrated clearly that they did not understand what I was building or why it was valuable. My mother called every 2 to 3 weeks during college. The calls were warm and covered the appropriate topics: grades, health, social life, plans for holidays. She did not ask about the work I was doing beyond the coursework because she did not have a framework for asking about it, and I did not offer it. She asked about Ashley's company regularly. The Callaway collection had been operating for 5 years by the time I was a junior and had found a stable client base in the Atlanta corporate gifting market. It was not growing dramatically, but it was sustainable, and Ashley was happy running it, and my mother found it easy to engage with because she understood it, and because Ashley's happiness in the work was visible and uncomplicated. I graduated from Georgia Tech in May of my senior year with a 4-point GPA and a software company that had 7 paying customers and was generating enough monthly recurring revenue to cover my living costs and the development infrastructure and a small salary that I was paying myself. My parents came to the graduation. My mother said she was proud. I said thank you. She asked what my plans were after graduation. I said I was going to keep building FlowOps. She said, "The software thing you've been working on." I said, "Yes." She said, "Is that going to be enough to support you?" I said, "I think so." She said, "You should talk to your father about whether Callaway Transport Partners could use some help. He's been looking for a good operations coordinator." I said, "I'll keep that in mind." I moved to a small office in Midtown Atlanta 2 months after graduation. The office was a shared workspace. I had a desk in an open floor plan with a dozen other early-stage companies and access to a conference room I could book when I needed it. The monthly cost was manageable against the revenue FlowOps was generating, and the environment was better for the work than the apartment because the ambient energy of other people working on real things was more productive than the ambient silence of working alone. I hired my first employee in the 3rd month after graduation. Her name was Keisha Morgan, and she had been a computer science graduate student at Georgia Tech when I had been finishing my senior year and had done 2 months of contract work on FlowOps during that period. She was the right first hire because she understood the product, believed in the direction, and had the specific technical capability I needed to accelerate the development of the features that the early customers were requesting. The customer base grew from 7 to 23 in the first year after graduation. I did not call this to my family's attention. The Atlanta logistics and distribution software market was not a large market in the way that consumer markets were large. It was a specific market with a specific population of potential customers and a set of relationships and reputation dynamics that meant word of mouth from existing customers was the most efficient channel, and that the word of mouth took time to develop but was durable once it did. I spent the first 2 years after graduation building the word of mouth infrastructure. Every customer conversation was a customer success priority. The product problems that customers encountered were addressed with the speed and directness of a founder who understood that in a market of this size, one lost customer was a lost reference, and a lost reference was a lost sales conversation with every company in their network. I was on calls with operations managers at 11 in the evening when exceptions happened. I was in their offices walking through integration questions in person when the remote support was not sufficient. I was the company in a way that required me to be the company completely for the first 2 years. The customer base grew to 47 by the end of the 2nd year. The annual recurring revenue crossed $600,000. Keisha and I hired a third person, a customer success manager named David Park, who had worked in logistics operations before transitioning to software, and who understood the customer's world from having been inside it. His first month on the team, he identified 3 product improvements from customer feedback that we had not prioritized, and that 3 customers independently confirmed were their most significant friction points. We built all 3 in the following quarter. Customer satisfaction scores improved measurably. By the 3rd year, FlowOps had 73 customers, annual recurring revenue of $1.2 million, and the specific trajectory of a product in a defined market that had found product-market fit and was moving through the market systematically. I had also, by the 3rd year, begun the process of understanding whether my father's business was in our potential customer base. Callaway Transport Partners was the right size for FlowOps. 140 employees, 6 distribution points, a regional operation with the specific operational complexity that our platform addressed. I had known this since I had been studying my father's operations at 14 and building the FlowOps concept from what I had observed. What I had not done was approach Callaway Transport Partners as a potential customer, because the relationship between being my father's daughter and being a software vendor to his company was a complexity I had managed by avoiding it. What changed my thinking was a conversation with Daniel Osai, who had left Georgia Tech the previous year to become the chief technology officer of a mid-size Atlanta logistics company. He had implemented FlowOps in his first month at the new company. He called me 3 months after the implementation and said the platform had reduced their dispatch exception rate by 31% and their fuel optimization variance by 18%, and that he had started recommending it to every operations manager he knew in the Atlanta market. He said, "Who are your biggest competitors in this space right now?" I told him the 3 platforms that were most commonly mentioned in the competitive landscape of our target market size. He said, "Do you know that your father's company uses one of those platforms?" I said, "I suspected." He said, "They switched to it 2 years ago. I know their IT director from a conference. He mentioned it." I said, "How are they doing with it?" Daniel said, "I'd ask him." I thought about this for 2 weeks. Then I called the IT director of Callaway Transport Partners. His name was Raymond Hollies, and he had been with my father's company for 6 years, and he did not initially know who I was in relation to the company's ownership, because I had called from a FlowOps line and introduced myself as FlowOps' founder. We had a professional conversation about their current platform and their satisfaction with it, and the specific pain points they were experiencing. He was candid in the way that IT directors were candid when talking to a vendor they had not yet committed to, which was honest about the problems without being specific about the financial details. The problems he described were the problems FlowOps was built to solve. At the end of the call, he said, "You should know I'll need to run this by Gerald Callaway before we go any further." I said, "I know Gerald." He said, "You do?" I said, "He's my father." There was a pause. He said, "Maya Callaway." I said, "Yes." He said, "Does he know you called?" I said, "Not yet." He said, "Okay." Another pause. "This is interesting." I said, "I'd like to schedule a demo for you and whoever else you think should see it. The connection to my father is real and I'm not hiding it, but I want you to evaluate FlowOps on the merits. If it's the right fit, it'll be the right fit regardless of who my father is." He said, "Fair enough." The demo was the following week. Raymond had brought 3 people to the demo, himself, the operations director, and my father's chief of staff, a woman named Barbara who managed the operational decisions that went to my father for final approval. My father was not in the room. I ran the demo for 45 minutes, not the investor pitch version, the operational version, the one that showed exactly what the platform did with realistic data scenarios drawn from the type of operation Callaway Transport Partners ran. I had built a demo environment using publicly available data from Georgia South Carolina regional logistics operations that was close enough to their actual operational profile to make the demonstration specific rather than generic. The operations director asked 14 questions during the demo. They were good questions, specific, operationally grounded, the questions of someone who understood their own operations well enough to probe exactly the points where a platform either delivered or did not. I answered all 14 correctly because I had built the platform to answer exactly those questions. At the end, Raymond said, "How long would implementation take for an operation our size?" I said, "Based on what you've described, 6 to 8 weeks for full integration with your existing systems. We've done comparable integrations in that range." He said, "And the pricing?" I told him the pricing. He looked at Barbara. She looked at Raymond. Barbara said, "I'll set up a meeting with Gerald." I said, "I expected that." She said, "Does he know about the demo?" I said, "I told him I had called Raymond and that a demo was scheduled. I didn't tell him how it went." She said, "How do you think it went?" I said, "You asked about implementation and pricing. I think it went well." My father called me the evening after the demo. He said, "Raymond gave me a full report." I said, "Okay." He said the demo was the strongest product demonstration he had seen in 6 years of evaluating logistics software. I said, "Raymond knows his operations. He asked the right questions." My father was quiet for a moment. He said, "Maya, tell me about FlowOps." I told him, not the version I had been carrying internally for 4 years, the full version, the 14 months of Georgia Tech coursework feeding into the Createx program, the customer discovery conversations, some of which I had done through his industry network, the first prototype, the first 3 paying customers, the 7 at graduation, the 23 at the end of year 1, the 47 at the end of year 2, the 73 current customers, the 1.2 million in annual recurring revenue. He was quiet while I talked and quiet for a moment after I finished. He said, "You've been building this since sophomore year." I said, "Yes." He said, "You used my industry contacts for customer discovery." I said, "Yes, I should have told you. I used the access to do research without identifying myself as your daughter in most of the conversations." He said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, "Because I needed to build it in an environment where the building was the only thing happening. If I had told you, there would have been opinions and concerns and the specific weight of what you and Mom thought about it, and I couldn't carry that weight and build at the same time." He was quiet again. He said, "Your mother said you had no real future in this direction." I said, "Yes." He said, "She was wrong." I said, "I know." He said, "I should have said that then. I didn't, I'm sorry." I said, "I know, Dad." He said, "I want to implement FlowOps at Callaway Transport Partners." I said, "I know, we need to do it properly. Same commercial process as any other customer. Same pricing, same contract, same implementation timeline. I'm not giving you a family discount." He said, "I wouldn't want one." I said, "Good." He said, "One more thing." I said, "Okay." He said, "Your mother's going to want to talk to you." I said, "I know." He said, it's going to be a complicated conversation." I said, "I know, Dad." My mother called the following morning. She had clearly been thinking about what she was going to say because the call had a quality of prepared delivery that I recognized as her way of handling conversations where she was uncertain of the reception. She said she had heard from my father. She said she had heard about FlowOps. She said she was proud of me. I said, "Thank you." She said, "I want you to know that when I said what I said about the software field, I was worried about you. I was concerned about the risk, and I expressed that concern in a way that was not." I said, "Mom." She said, "Let me finish." I said, "Okay." She said, "I expressed it in a way that was not what I meant. I didn't mean you had no future. I meant I was afraid for you. I said it wrong." I said, "You said I had no real future in that direction. Those were the specific words." She said, I know. I said, and you were funding Ashley's business at the time. She said, I know. I said, I'm not asking for an accounting of the $300,000. I'm saying those two things together communicated something very specific about who the family believed in. She was quiet. She said, You're right, I know you're right. I said, I believe you were worried about me. I believe you said it wrong. I also believe the family's actual position was what it was, and what it was produced a specific outcome for me, which was that I built Flow Ops without any family support, and with student loans I am still paying off, and I built it in the specific focused way that no support and no audience required. She said, and you're saying it might not have been what it is if the circumstances had been different. I said, I'm saying the circumstances were what they were, and the outcome is what it is, and I'm not interested in the version of the conversation where we rewrite the circumstances. She said, What are you interested in? I said, a real relationship, which is different from the relationship where I perform gratitude for what the family thinks I should be grateful for. She said, What does real look like? I said, You asking me about the work the way you ask Ashley about hers. You actually wanting to know the answer. She said, I want to know the answer. I said, Then ask me a question about Flow Ops that isn't about the revenue. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What problem does it solve? I told her. For the first time, I told my mother about the specific operational pain points that Flow Ops addressed, and why they mattered to the businesses that were dealing with them, and what the platform had built that the existing solutions had not built, and why the gap between what existed and what Flow Ops provided was the reason customers were choosing it. She listened. When I finished, she said, Your father's been dealing with that exception problem for years. He talks about it. I said, I know. I've been listening to him talk about it since I was 14. She said, And that's why you built this. I said, Part of why. She said, What's the other part? I said, To prove that you were wrong. She was quiet. She said, Fair enough. She said it without defensiveness. She said it as someone receiving a true thing that cost her something to receive and choosing to receive it honestly rather than managing it into something more comfortable. I said, I appreciate that. The Callaway Transport Partners implementation went live 6 weeks after the commercial agreement was signed. Raymond Hollies managed the implementation on their side with the organized efficiency of someone who had been through software implementations before and who had prepared his team for what the process required. The integration took 7 weeks rather than the projected 6 to 8, which was within the expected range. The first operational data from the implementation showed a reduction in dispatch exceptions of 24% in the first month. My father called me when the month-end report came through. He said, 24%. I said, the first month is usually conservative. The team is still adjusting their workflows to the platform. It typically improves in months 2 and 3 as the adoption deepens. He said, How do you know what typically happens? I said, Because we have 73 customers and we track adoption curves. He said, Right. He said, Maya. I said, Yes. He said, I'm proud of you. I said, I know, Dad. The partnership contract arrived by email 4 months after the Flow Ops implementation at Callaway Transport Partners. It was not from my father. It was from Ashley. Ashley's email arrived on a Tuesday morning. The subject line was, Potential Partnership, the Callaway Collection X Flow Ops. I opened it. The body of the email was 3 paragraphs. The first explained that the Callaway collection had grown to the point where operational efficiency tools were becoming relevant to the business, and that Ashley had been learning about Flow Ops from my father's implementation and believed there was potential for a beneficial partnership. The second paragraph described the Callaway collection's current operational situation and the specific challenges it was experiencing. The third paragraph said Ashley would love to discuss a potential partnership arrangement and had attached a preliminary partnership proposal for my review. I opened the attachment. The partnership proposal was 8 pages. It was professionally formatted. It had been prepared with help. The structure and language were not Ashley's natural register, which I recognized because I had known Ashley for 28 years, and her natural register was warm and direct, and this document was formal in the specific way of something drafted with legal or consulting assistance. The proposal described a joint branding arrangement in which FlowOps would be integrated into the Callaway Collection's operational systems, and in which the Callaway Collection would serve as a promotional partner for FlowOps in the Atlanta corporate events and gifting market, with the understanding that the platform would be provided to the Callaway Collection at a reduced rate in exchange for the promotional relationship. I read the proposal once. Then I read the paragraph about the reduced rate again. The reduced rate that was being proposed was 80% below FlowOps's standard pricing for a business of the Callaway Collection size. I sat with the proposal for about 20 minutes. I thought about the $300,000. I thought about the October conversation in my senior year of high school. I thought about the phone calls during college where my mother had asked about Ashley's business and not about mine. I thought about the student loans I was still paying. I thought about the 14 months of Createx work and the first 3 customers and the 20 hours per week at the IT job, and the desk in the Midtown shared workspace, and every specific thing that had happened in the space that no family support had created. I thought about what the partnership proposal was actually saying, which was that the family had decided that FlowOps was now real enough to be useful, and that being useful to the family was the form the relationship should take. I thought about whether there was a version of the proposal that made sense. The promotional partnership component had some theoretical logic. The Callaway Collection did work with corporate clients who might be in the FlowOps target market, but the pricing terms made the proposal something other than a business arrangement. A business arrangement priced at 80% below market was a request for a subsidy, not a partnership. It was the same structure as the $300,000 for Ashley's business, dressed in partnership language. I thought about whether to respond by email or by phone. I called Ashley. She answered with the specific warmth she always answered with, which was genuine. Ashley's warmth was always genuine. She said, "Maya, did you see the proposal?" I said, "Yes, I read it." She said, "I'm really excited about this. I think it could be great for both of us." I said, "Tell me about the pricing terms." She said, "We thought 80% off made sense given the promotional value we'd bring." I said, "Ashley, FlowOps has 73 paying customers. I have documented case studies. I don't need promotional partners in the Atlanta gifting market." She said, "But the exposure." I said, "The exposure is not worth 80% of the platform fee. That's not how promotional partnerships are priced in the software industry." She said, "We're family." I said, "I know." She said, "Doesn't that mean something?" I said, "Yes, it means I'm going to be honest with you rather than just saying no by email." She said, "So you're not saying no?" I said, "I'm saying the proposal as written is not a business arrangement. The pricing makes it a subsidy request." She said, "That's harsh." I said, "Ashley, I love you. I also have a company that I built without family support, with student loans, in the specific careful way that having no support required. If the Callaway Collection wants to use FlowOps, I would genuinely love to have you as a customer, at the standard pricing for your business size." She said, "That's going to be expensive." I said, "It's the right price for what the platform delivers. You'd see the return." She said, "Mom thought." I said, "I know what Mom thought." She was quiet. She said, "Is this about the tuition thing?" I said, "It's about building a business that is financially healthy, which means pricing the product correctly regardless of who the customer is." She said, "Even family?" I said, "Especially family, because with family there is always pressure to make exceptions, and exceptions are how companies stop being companies." She said, "I'll have to think about it." I said, "Take your time." The email from Ashley came 2 days later. It was brief. It said she had given the pricing careful thought and that she did not think the standard pricing worked for the Callaway collection's current financial situation, and that she hoped we could revisit the conversation in the future. She also attached a revised version of the partnership proposal. The revised version had changed the pricing from 80% off to 60% off. I looked at the revised proposal for about 10 seconds. Then I pressed delete. Not as a statement, not as a message, as the straightforward action of removing from my inbox a document that did not represent a genuine business arrangement, and that did not require a response beyond the response I had already given in the phone call. The delete was the most ordinary thing in the story. My mother called the following week. She did not mention the proposal or the delete. We talked for 30 minutes about the FlowOps implementation at Callaway Transport Partners, and about whether I had been following a new development in the Atlanta logistics market, and about what I was building in the next product iteration. She asked specific questions and listened to the answers. The call was the version of the relationship I had described when she asked me what real looked like. I told Keisha about the delete the morning after it happened. She said, "Good." She said it the same way she said everything, which was directly and without elaboration. David Park had heard about the Callaway collection proposal through the Atlanta Business Network, which was smaller than it appeared and moved information with the speed of all small networks. He said, "Did you take the partnership?" I said no. He said, "Smart." He said, "A discounted family deal is the fastest way to compromise how the market reads you." I said, "I know." Atlanta in April had the specific quality of a city that had moved fully into spring, and that was operating with the energy of a place that had decided the season warranted it. The city moved faster in spring, the outdoor tables full, the specific ambient energy of a market that was growing in real time, and that I had chosen to be in because being inside a growing market while building a product for that market was the most efficient use of the same moment. FlowOps had 81 customers as of this month. The annual recurring revenue had crossed $1.8 million. Keisha had promoted to a lead engineering role, and we had hired 2 additional engineers under her. David's customer success operation had expanded to cover a portfolio that required his full attention, and that was producing the referral pipeline we had always projected as the primary growth channel in this market. The student loans had 16 months left on them. I was paying them with FlowOps revenue. Callaway Transport Partners was in month 5 of the implementation. The dispatch exception reduction had improved from 24% in month 1 to 31% in month 4, which was within the range we observed across our customer base for an operation of their size and complexity. My father sent me the month 4 report with a 1-sentence note that said, "This is real." I wrote back, "It's been real since month 1. My mother and I talk every week now. She asks about the platform and the customers and the product development, and she listens to the answers in a way she was not able to listen before because she did not have the framework, and she has been building the framework over the past months by asking and listening. She said last month, during a conversation about the next product iteration, "That sounds like the same problem Dad had with the South Carolina expansion in 2018. I said, "Yes. It's the same class of problem. That's actually one of the scenarios I'm building the next version to address." She said, "I remember him talking about that for months." I said, "I know, I was listening." She was quiet for a moment. She said, "You've been listening to all of this for a very long time." I said, "Yes." She said, "I should have been listening to you." I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm listening now." I said, "I know." Ashley and I have not revisited the partnership conversation. We talk at family events with the specific warmth of sisters who have a real relationship and a specific professional history that both of us understand and that neither of us is currently trying to reopen. She is running the Callaway collection with the genuine skill she has always had for the work, and the business is doing what it does, which is serve its clients well in a market that values exactly what she offers. That is its own real thing, and it does not need to be in relationship with what I built. The delete was not revenge. It was just the right answer to the wrong question. If this story meant something to you today, hit that like button, leave a comment, share it with someone who has been told they have no real future in the direction they are heading. Subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell. Every story here is this honest. Take care of yourselves and build the thing. See you next time.